Alright everyone, welcome back to another video. Last time we left off with the Mexican War, talking about the Mexican War, the Mexican-American War, more specifically. Kind of the people involved, and then a little bit at the end there talking about the Mormons and their settlement of what is now Utah, or the Great Salt Lake. But we're now on to the dispute over territories. In acquiring Texas, California, and the territories between, the nation also acquired a new political dispute. Should these vast regions be open or closed to slavery? The point of view of anti-slavery Northerners was pretty well expressed in James Russell Lowell's Bigelow Papers, or Bigelow Papers. Yeah. They just want this Californy so's to lug new slave states in, to abuse ye and to scorn ye, and to plunder ye like sin. It was long held in the North that President Polk's war was an attempt on the part of Southern politicians, and mainly Southern volunteers, to widen the area of Southern influence. The actual situation was a little more complex. Most Americans, regardless of section, favored any American expansion, and a few Southerners, such as Senator John C. Calhoun of South Carolina, dreaded that acquiring new territory in the Southwest might reopen the slavery dispute and feed the fires of abolitionism. In any event, this is what happened. David Wilmot of Pennsylvania introduced a resolution favoring freedom for California and all other territories acquired from Mexico. Texas was already a slave state. This precipitated a bitter controversy, and there was talk of a Southern secession in the Wilmot Proviso were enacted. If the Wilmot were enacted. Three veteran politicians rushed into the breach to patch up a compromise similar to the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which had kept the slave question with bounds for a generation. Daniel Webster, Henry Clay, and John C. Calhoun offered solutions. In the meantime, President Taylor had died, and the question came up in the time of Millard Fillmore, his vice presidential successor. Clay worked out the details of this compromise of 1850. California was to be admitted, as she wished, as a free state. The new territories were to be organized without reference to the slave question. The Texas boundaries were readjusted. The slave trade, though not slavery itself, was to be barred from the District of Columbia, and federal marshals were empowered to capture fugitive slaves in the North, in case local officials failed to act. All this was accepted, and even the bitter dose of the fugitive slave law by Daniel Webster from the North. But Calhoun desired more. Either the North must cease to agitate for abolition, or each section should have a veto on the acts of the other, an arrangement similar to the two consuls of the old Roman Republic. Webster's acquiescence caused bitter criticism from anti-slavery men. The poet John Greenleaf Whittier spoke of Webster as a fallen archangel. The attempt to recapture a fugitive slave in Massachusetts called out a large force of soldiers, and Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote the most widely circulated American novel of the generation, Uncle Tom's Cabin, as a protest against the law. A few politicians, North and South, accepted the Compromise of 1850 as a final solution of the slavery question, but the country at large was more shaken by it than ever before. The entire decade of the 1850s was full of sectional agitation, leading directly and perhaps inevitably to the war in the 1860s. I think that's all of the reading for today. Yeah, that is all the reading. So this compromise of 1850, while it was meant to patch relations, it only made things significantly worse. Um, Many people felt that their rights were being taken away, especially with the Fugitive Slave Act. That was probably the worst provision. There probably could have been another provision given that maybe would have been taken a little bit more um, handily, but that provision itself was too much for many to bear. Um, it felt as though their rights as individuals, as states, were being just fully usurped by other states, and people did not like that at all. Um, you got to remember, at this time, the United States is not called the United States. Many people don't even think of it as the United States. I'm using that word very specifically, obviously. Many people saw it as these United States, um, because realistically, that's how they were raised. They were thought a lot of people thought of their state first rather than the country first. You could say, which makes sense. You can actually see that a lot in the Civil War. But what in turn that does is when you have provisions like this, people feel their right as a state is being usurped fully, and it just leads to more issues. Uncle Tom's Cabin and things like that get written, and it really shows how people viewed this. Um, it was really a bad decision, even if it was trying to prevent something. It in turn caused that something to happen. Um, so really, it was pretty dumb. Sure, there could have been another provision, but who knows? Realistically, who knows? And the presidents of the time didn't really help. The 1850s has some pretty weak presidents, and even before the 1850s, we have some pretty weak presidents on the slavery question, where there could have been maybe a better leader in charge. Maybe things would have been handled more easily, and things could have moved into a period where people would have better been understood of the situations of things, and maybe things could have been worked out a little smoother. But who knows? We just don't know. It's just not possible to know. But now we're going to get into the pictures. So at the top, right there, I believe. Ah, no. Okay. My bad. Looking at the wrong little words here. At the left here, yes. This is John C. Calhoun, the powerful senator from South Carolina. Later, vice president under both John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. And John C. Calhoun, um, obviously pretty well known, mostly because his name is very easy to remember. But yeah, he has a very legacied political career, and people relatively do like him quite a bit. That's why he has so much political sway in this dispute because of his political past. I mean, he's got a lot of credit with the people of South Carolina, especially, but other states look to him and kind of respect him as well. Um, at the bottom here is San Francisco was a bustling little town in 1851, just after Henry Clay's Compromise of 1850s, in which California was admitted as a free state. The 9th of September, 1850. And it's funny to think of this is San Francisco. You think about it today, it's obviously a much larger city, but yeah, back in the 1850s, it's just this tiny little town. Obviously, it's a port city. It's one of the reasons it grows so large. It's a port city. Port cities tend to grow um, quite large. If you look at all of the largest cities in the world, typically they are on water. Not always, but typically. Um, yeah, just interesting. It's a lot easier to grow bigger on a waterway there. At the right here is the newly elected James K. Polk, the 11th President of the United States, watches benignly as expansionists threaten Oregon, and as John C. Calhoun, the then Secretary of State, rides out of the cabinet. Yeah, you can see there's Polk. He's like, whatever. And you can see everyone's kind of arguing, and things are just rapidly deteriorating. And there's Calhoun running away. That's a lot of people would have had that view at that time of Calhoun and a lot of what he was saying and things like that. Just how it is. But now We'll go down to these ones. At the top here, this is Daniel Webster. Obviously, very well known and very much talked about in this. And then above here, right here, is Henry Clay. Webster, the great orator, was first a representative in Congress from New Hampshire and later both a congressman and senator from Massachusetts. Clay was a powerful senator from Kentucky. Yeah, Clay, obviously very well known. Very interesting fella. If you look at his later life too, kind of crazy. But hey, you know what? Sometimes you need a little bit of craziness to help rein in the uh, other crazies, you know? So above here is a political cartoon of 1844 entitled Great Prize Fight of the American Eagle Against the Wolf and the Alligator. The question was which new states would be admitted to the Union as slave states and which would not be. Spain, the alligator, and England, the wolf in sheep's clothing, are being accused of meddling in the resolution of the problem. And you can see there's the eagle, there's the alligator, there's the wolf in sheep's clothing. Makes a lot of sense. The alligator, Florida, um, you know, makes a little bit of sense there. The wolf in sheep's clothing. It's England looking like, oh, hey, we're such friends. Not so much. You gotta remember these political cartoons. You know, they don't hold back at all. So at the left here is slaves were often badly treated. The title of this engraving is Barbarity Committed on a Free African, who was found on the ensuing morning by the side of the road, dead. Yeah, this happened often enough that it was a problem, of course. Wasn't like an everyday kind of thing, but it did happen, and it did happen too often. A lot of free Africans would be in the States for multiple reasons. Either A, they were a slave that was freed, or they were just a traveler from Africa. Um, and because of the laws and the rules of the time, this happened quite often. Very, very awfully. And it's awful that it ever happened to these people. These people suffered in ways they really should not have. At the top here is the character appeared after the Dred Scott decision of 1857 and was entitled Conquering Prejudice on or Fulfilling a Constitutional Duty with Atrocity. In it pictures two sanctimonious white men pursuing a slave and her baby. The slave says, "My God, my child will no one help. Is there no mercy?" The man in the middle remarks, "Any man can perform an agreeable duty. It is not everyone that can perform a disagreeable duty." The man at the right observes, "By heaven he exceeds my most sanguine expectations. He marks his way so clearly and treads so loyally on the track of the Constitution. It is more than great, it is sublime. I feel a great sense of relief." Yes, I mean, the Dred Scott decision, awful decision. Obviously, it was constitutional, but just because it was constitutional doesn't mean it was the right thing to do. You got to remember, sometimes just because the law is the law doesn't always mean it is the right thing. It's not the morally correct option. Legally, it could be the right option, but morally, not so much. And this is a caricature of that. At the right is a picture here. It's a poster from 1851 warning black people of the power of the Boston police. Yeah, saying, "Hey, run away. These police are not there to help you. They're going to harm you." Just kind of true. Um, Unfortunately, it was way too true. And at the far right here is the front piece of pictures and stories from Uncle Tom's Cabin. Yeah, Uncle Tom's Cabin, obviously very, very influential. It's a good read if you ever have read it. You can really understand why a lot of these people feel the way they did, and you can really get an understanding of the feelings of the time. But that's going to do it for this video. If you guys liked the video, leave a like. If you have any ways you can improve these videos, leave a comment down below. I always appreciate your feedback. And as always, subscribe. It really does help out the channel. Thank you.